I swear by the Gita that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much. Do have a seat. Yes.
Could you start by stating your full name, please?
Yeah, my name is Lakshmi Prabha Ramasubramanian.
And please could we have your witness statement on screen, which is AHCH 000239? Is that your witness statement?
Yes, that's correct.
And is that statement true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
Yes.
I want to start with some background. So it's right, isn't it, that you are a consultant child and adolescent psychiatrist?
That's correct.
And you've been working in the NHS for the last 14 years?
That's correct.
But in psychiatry generally for over 20 years?
That's correct.
And you're currently working as a consultant child and adolescent psychiatrist and paediatric neuropsychiatrist at Alder Hey Children's NHS Foundation Trust.
That's correct.
And is it right that you've held that role since 2011?
Absolutely, yes.
And you work in the Sefton Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services, which we've been referring to as CAMS.
Yes.
Just as a very brief overview of your involvement, is it right that you were assigned to AR as his consultant psychiatrist from the 1st of July 2021 until the 23rd of June 2022?
Yes.
So the first main topic I want to ask you about is about your allocation to AR's case and your awareness of the background information relating to AR when you first became involved.
Yeah. So within Sefton CAMS, psychiatry involvement is requested via multidisciplinary team meetings. I was aware that AR was already open to our service and that he had had involvement with Prevent and forensic CAMS. I was also aware that he was discussed in multidisciplinary team meeting in MDT3 previously and placed on the routine psychiatry waiting list. Following that, in May 2021, he was discussed again, and the notes suggest that he was making progress, but he was requesting medication, and hence he was placed on the urgent psychiatry waiting list and then allocated to me.
Okay, so that's how he first became allocated to you, and then I understand your first appointment with him was on the 1st of July 2021. And what information did you have access to about AR at the start of your involvement? We saw this morning the electronic patient system. Would that be the main source of information?
Yeah, so as a consultant child psychiatrist, I would heavily rely on information on electronic patient records and verbal kind of information from the case manager, whom he is open to. I was aware that there had been previous FCAMS and Prevent involvement, basically from some session notes or some notes on electronic patient records and from the case manager Samantha Steed, but I did not have any access to reports or letters from either of these services.
And is that typical, that you wouldn't have access to other agencies' record systems?
Not unless they are scanned, or we used to have at the time in 2021, we used to have something called Image Now on electronic patient records. So any information or letters that are scanned from external agencies would be visible through the Image Now app. Unfortunately, there was nothing on Image Now for AR.
Okay, so the system in CAMS at that time was that you were essentially reliant on other agencies sending you information or records that they may have, and somebody at CAMS uploading that onto the CAMS system.
That's correct.
And you said that you had access to the electronic patient system, the CAMS records. You explain at paragraph 12 of your statement that you familiarised yourself with AR's background history by reviewing the Alder Hey records. Did you review his records in their entirety?
I reviewed his records in its entirety from the point he was referred into CAMS. So I was aware that there had been 3 CAMS referrals made. The first one, he was signposted to a voluntary sector organization called Parenting 2000 for parenting support. The second referral was also not accepted. And following an offense, the third referral, which was made by Criminal Justice Liaison Service, was accepted, and he was allocated a case manager. So I had access to information from that point onwards.
Okay, and you reviewed the records from that
Yes,
point
I did.
onwards. And is that what was expected of you as a consultant psychiatrist, to review the whole records when you take on a new patient?
I would like to say that when you say whole records, Alder Hey has so many different departments, and electronic patient records may include information from other departments, not just CAMS. So usually we find that there are relevant information about patients from community pediatrics, for example, which may be relevant to our kind of approach to the patient, especially around the diagnosis of neurodiversity or other kind of information, safeguarding information, for example. Sometimes, you only have access to view certain records, not all of them, unless they are actually in the form of clinic letters that are uploaded onto a system called Medisec. So if the patient is open to, say, for example, a pediatric specialty for a physical health problem, I will be able to access their records by reviewing clinic letters if they are uploaded.
All right, so when you said you reviewed the whole of the records for AR, just to be clear, which records do you mean? Was it just CAMS records?
That's right.
And were you provided with an oral or written handover by the case manager or anyone else when you first became involved?
Okay, so within CAMS at Alder Hey, there is no standardized handover procedure that we follow. A referral to psychiatry would be made via multidisciplinary team discussions, an agreement made, and a consensus that the patient should be accepted by psychiatry. And that information would be then available on electronic patient records in the form of professional discussion, often documented by an administrative staff. So the administrative staff will capture the discussion and make a brief summary of the discussion, and that often that is the only information you have with regards to why the patient has been referred to psychiatry.
And do you remember in AR's specific case whether you were, like the example you just gave, you were just relying on a written handover, or whether there was a separate oral handover?
Nothing at all. So that the only information I had was from the electronic patient records. And also I had a brief conversation with the case manager about AR's request for medication.
Was that when you first became involved, or did that come later?
Just prior to I became involved.
All right. I want to ask you about some aspects of AR's history which predated your involvement. And you've already touched on some of these things. So I think you've already said that you were aware that AR had been referred to CAMS on multiple occasions.
That's right.
Were you aware that came from different sources?
Yes. I was aware that it came from school and from Criminal Justice Liaison Service and from the GP.
Did you draw any significance from the fact there had been multiple referrals? For example, that it indicated there was concern coming from multiple directions?
It is not unusual for CAMS to get referrals from multiple agencies, such as GP, primary care, or school health, because when the first referral is not accepted, often the second route of referral is followed. And it is again not unusual for children with mild presentations to not be accepted and signposted to our third sector organizations.
I think you've also touched on the fact that you said you were aware that AR had been previously referred to FCAMS, is that right?
That's correct.
Were you aware that they discharged him from their service
That's
in
correct.
March 2020?
That's correct.
And did you know that the reason for that was because they said that in order to feed into a risk assessment, essentially, they would need an autism diagnosis?
Yeah, I was aware of that, but I don't agree with it.
Okay, we'll come on to that. Were you aware that they had said that if there was a significant change in circumstances or risk behaviour that he should be, or he could be re-referred to FCAMS?
I was not aware of that during my involvement, but as part of the inquiry, I've been shared that information, and I only recently became aware of that.
Could we have a look at AHCH 000231, please? If we go to the next page. So the inquiry has received evidence that there were 2 letters sent by FCAMS, one on the 11th of February 2020 and the second on the 9th of March 2020. The inquiry's heard evidence that those letters weren't scanned into the CAMS system.
No.
So were you, at the time of your involvement with AR, aware of these letters?
Not
Had
at
you
all.
seen them?
Not at all.
So how was it that you were aware, essentially, of the evidence you just gave about what FCAMS had said?
So there were a couple of lines on the electronic patient records. I think it was in the referral and triage information that AR had previously had involvement with FCAMS and Prevent, and that he was deemed not to be at risk to others.
Were you aware that FCAMS had really had quite a limited involvement in the sense of attending just 2 multi-agency meetings and
That's
then
correct.
sending these 2 letters?
That's correct.
Were you aware from your review of the records that in February 2021 AR had in fact received his autism diagnosis?
Yes, I was aware of that.
So did you consider that there was a need to re-refer him to FCAMS in light of that?
As I was not aware of the FCAMS recommendation, that wasn't action.
Wouldn't have known. You've mentioned Prevent referrals. Were you aware that AR had been referred to Prevent 3 times?
Yes,
But by July 2021 he was closed to Prevent.
that's correct.
How did you become aware of those referrals?
Again, based on the couple of lines in the triage, referral and triage information, and on the electronic patient records.
And did you know the reasons for the Prevent referrals?
Yes, so I was only aware of the fact that prior to my involvement, AR had hurt a peer with a hockey stick at school, and that he had taken knife into school, and those were the only 2 incidents I was aware of.
All right. So you weren't aware of the circumstances that led to the other Prevent referrals?
No.
You say at paragraph 12 of your statement that AR was closed to FCAMS and Prevent, this is by the time you became involved, and was deemed not to be at risk of radicalisation, counter-terrorism or risk to others. Did you take reassurance from the fact that AR had been closed to agencies like Prevent and FCAMS?
Absolutely. It's extremely reassuring and allows community psychiatrists like me to focus on what is presented to you and to kind of treat here and now and the presenting symptoms, and not worry about the risk to others, because we see FCAMS and Prevent as highly specialist organizations and services, and rely on their evidence and reports.
Is taking the closure by those agencies as an indication, just you just said, to essentially just not worry about the risk presented?
Not really. We do have children with neurodiversity, such as autism spectrum disorder or ADHD, presenting with disruptive behaviors, challenging behaviors, behaviors of concern during involvement with CAMS. So we are quite, well-versed in understanding and formulating difficulties like that on the basis of anxiety or autism spectrum disorder. However, when you have organizations like FCAMS or Prevent offering us reassurance that these are just disruptive behaviors and there is nothing to worry about in terms of harm to others, it is rather quite reassuring for me.
Well, in terms of Prevent, how much reassurance could you really draw from that when you didn't know the details of the second 2 referrals or the reasons why they'd been closed?
Okay, so I have had previous involvement with Prevent for other patients of mine, and I have a fair idea about how they work, and that includes FCAMS as well. So, which is why I was able to be reassured that if Prevent has closed a young person, that's quite reassuring.
So in your mind, did that kind of signal to you that you didn't need to look into further detail, risk to others by AR or risk of radicalization, interest in terrorism, for example?
Okay, so the reason why AR was referred to me as a psychiatrist was for anxiety, avoidance behaviors, isolative behaviors, and school refusal. So as a psychiatrist working for a therapeutic service, when I have a reassurance offered by services like FCAMS and Prevent that there is no risk to others, it gives me permission to focus on the presenting problems and to enable the child to get better and to enable them to kind of reintegrate with education and reduce their anxiety levels. And that was my goal of treatment.
So your focus was very much on treating the symptoms.
Absolutely.
Not necessarily concerned with assessment of risk based on previous.
No, psychiatrists conduct risk assessment at every contact. So our lines of questioning a patient or our lines of questioning of a parent always is heavily informed by the presenting problems. Say, for example, if a child presents with self-neglect or with self-harming behavior, one would start looking at risk of, self-neglect, depression, poor functioning, and that would be the lines of inquiry for a psychiatrist. For AR, because the presentation was one of avoidance, anxiety, and isolative behaviors, my risk assessment was heavily informed by that, and my lines of inquiry was into his functioning, his anxiety levels, and the risks he may face because of the fact that he's not having age-appropriate interactions and age-appropriate opportunities.
All right, we'll come back to some of those points later. Going back to the reassurance you took from Prevent and FCAMS closing their referrals, we've already talked about Prevent, so I'll leave that to one side. Could we just have the FCAMS letter back up on screen, which is AHCH 000231? And could we look at the bottom of page 4, please? So if we could zoom in, yes, the following aspects of young people with an ASC diagnosis should be taken into account when considering risk. And then there's a list, if we go over the page. List continues, number of things drawn out there, but we see hostility to parents, lack of awareness for wrongdoing, deficits in empathy, not seeing consequences. And then Mr. Hickling goes on to conclude, I'm of the opinion that assessment by our service is not indicated, as until diagnosis is complete, we would not be able to contribute further to the understanding of risk. then the last sentence, the case will now be closed to FCAMS, but any professional can contact the service for clarification of this letter, or if review is indicated because of a significant change in circumstances or risk behaviour. So Mr. Hicklin wasn't saying there's no risk here. He was simply saying that at that time, until the diagnosis was complete, they felt they couldn't contribute further to understanding of risk. So had you had access to that letter and been aware of it at the relevant time, would that have changed how much assurance you would have drawn from the closure by FCAMS?
Absolutely, absolutely. I would be more interested in also knowing about AR's thought processes around harming other people and use of weapons, certainly, and that would have made my approach a little bit more holistic to include risk to others as well, because what I had in front of me and what I was aware of did not alert me to consider risk to others as a major factor.
Yes, and I think now's a good time then to go through some of the specific events that took place involving AR. And this is all I'm going to be asking you if you can confirm in respect of each of these, whether you were aware of that when you first started seeing AR in July 2021. So firstly, I think you've mentioned already that you were aware of this, that AR had admitted taking knives into school. Were you aware that that was on 10 occasions?
No. I was only aware that he took knife to school on one occasion and that he had hurt a peer with a hockey stick on one occasion.
Okay, so the knife carrying, that was as part of the hockey stick incident?
Yeah.
Were you aware that he was seen in an ICT lesson on the 15th of November 2019 looking at material concerning school shootings?
No, I was not.
What about the fact that he appears to have been attempting to view graphic images of degloving injuries?
I was not aware of that.
And on the 29th of November, he was attending a lesson where students were asked to promote a business, and he said he didn't think it'd be a good idea if his business was new to the area, because people would think he would kill them as they didn't know him.
I was not aware of that.
And he went on to say that people don't trust others they don't know in case they get murdered.
I was not aware of that.
Were you aware that on the 3rd of December 2019, in an art lesson, AR questioned why he was allowed to look at images from a video game, but couldn't look at guns on the internet, and he also asked to look at a picture of a severed head?
No, I wasn't aware of that.
You've said you were aware of the hockey stick incident in
Yes.
December 2019. Were you aware that there's some contradiction in statements as to his intent, but were you aware that some of what is recorded, he says that he would have been prepared to use the knife?
I wasn't aware of that.
And were you aware that the person he attacked was not the person that he perceived to be bullying him, but in fact another boy who happened to be passing?
Yes, the case manager did inform me about that detail, that he had hurt the wrong person. That was what I heard.
Were you aware that on the 1st of February 2021, AR was posting material relating to Gaddafi on Instagram?
No.
And that in February 2020, he was convicted in relation to the hockey stick attack and received a 10-month referral order?
Yes, I was aware of the fact that he had a pupil referral order. Yeah, that was in the electronic patient records, along with the information about the two incidents.
And in April 2021, he was seen on a school computer to be looking at pages relating to London Bridge terror attack, and he spoke in detail about the IRA, thought that the MI5 were being asked to kill people in the IRA.
No, I wasn't aware of that.
And about the conflict in Israel and Palestine. Finally, were you aware of an incident on the 17th of May 2021 where AR was reported to have thrown juice over his father and to have hit him?
No, I wasn't aware of that.
Do you agree that all of those incidents looked at together and individually would be highly relevant to your understanding of how he was presenting?
Yes, absolutely.
And any assessment of risk that you were making would be flawed if you didn't have knowledge of those incidents?
Yes, so risk assessments that we conducted in CAMS based on the presenting problems would be considered quite appropriate. But with insufficient information, we were not focusing on risk to others, and that was only because of the fact that we were not aware of it.
Well, let's have a look at what was in the CAMS records. Not all of those incidents, in fairness, were, but some of them were. For example, the fact that he had taken a knife into school on at least 10 occasions and had the intention of using it, that was in the CAMS records.
Okay, I think that was a community pediatric record that we don't have access to. We checked that was not a CAMS record. It was a record from ACONS, I think, school to, that was not sent to CAMS, but to community pediatrics, if I recall this correctly.
Well, let's just have a quick look at the record. So it's AHCH 000162. So this shows, I believe, the CAMS electronic patient record. Is that right?
Yes, I think this looks like a referral, a discussion following referral to the service.
Oh, yes, sorry, this is just page 1. So if we look at the bottom of page 3, please. If we could zoom in on the bottom paragraph. It says he's been recently excluded after taking a knife into school with the intention of using it if provoked. And if we could also look at page 9. The third paragraph down, which starts seize computers. There we can see it says AR spoke to Childline and told them he took a knife into school on 10 separate occasions. Childline spoke to the police. So do you accept that that was on the CAMS?
Yeah, this looks like a CAMS record.
All right. And the fact that in the hockey stick incident, AR had the intention of killing someone, I'm happy to take you to the reference, but perhaps you can take it from me now. We've looked at that one. That is also in the CAMS records, and it's the same document that page 4 and 8. The 10-month the fact that he, we can take that down. The fact that he received a 10-month referral order, you said you were aware of, and that was in the records. The fact that he'd been viewing an inappropriate content online in relation to terrorism, that was also in the records. That's AHCH 000162, page 9, top of the page, just for the chair's record. We don't need to bring it up. There were several other matters also in the records. Firstly, the fact that he had researched the Manchester bombing and considered that it was a good battle from the suicide bomber's perspective. And that he'd been researching the London Bridge bombings and making comments about Israel and Palestine at school and had to be referred to Prevent again. And finally, the incident where AR threw juice over his father, and those references were given, Chair, this morning in the context of Dr. Molyneux's evidence.
Yes, thank you.
So, although you said that you'd reviewed the records in full, the only incidents of the ones we've gone through, which you were in fact aware of, was essentially the hockey stick incident and the referral order that follows. Do you accept that you must have not conducted a very thorough review of the record, or you've missed these entries somehow?
I do accept that, yeah, accept that.
How do you think it came to be that crucial background information such as that simply failed to reach you?
I think when a new patient is referred to you and then you look through records to the best of your ability and feel reassured that that two agencies like FEFCAMS and Prevent have closed him to their care, and that the current presenting symptom is one of anxiety and avoidant behaviors and school refusal. I guess that's one of the reasons why I just moved on to focus on the presenting problems.
Is there really two elements of weakness here? Is the first that there was a weakness in the system, in the sense that the CAMS system for keeping track of really important information about risk didn't make it clear to you as an incoming practitioner that information should have been clearly visible to you on the system, shouldn't it?
Yeah. On reflection, certainly, I agree with that.
But secondly, given that for the entries I've taken to you, that some of that information clearly was on the system, do you accept that you failed to that extent in your duty to adequately check the notes and inform yourself of the background?
Yes, to an extent, I should have reviewed the records in its entirety. But in many instances, we get a good picture of the young person referred to you by reviewing records from the time they get referred to CAMS, and that gives you a clear sense of their journey and their presenting problems. So I guess it was an oversight on my part to have missed some information, but I did know that that there was a risk of risk of harming others, and that behavior of him I was aware of at the time of seeing him.
What was resourcing an issue which in any way contributed to the failure to do a full review of the records, do you think?
On reflection, when a patient is referred to psychiatry, it could be, it could have been really helpful to have a standardized information handover to psychiatry, specifically focusing on the key areas of risk to self, risk to others, risk of self-neglect, and risk of vulnerability. That in a one-page format would really alert the psychiatrist to to key information that you need before you see a patient. So that is definitely a learning that I have taken from this inquiry.
Thank you. Would an awareness of all those incidents that we've gone through, which do demonstrate, I would suggest, a history of violence and an interest in violence, have been important to your assessment of the risk that AR posed to others?
Certainly, yeah.
Would it also have been relevant to your consideration of any mental health conditions he posed or the diagnosis?
Absolutely. It would have alerted me to think about preoccupation with violence, to rule out conditions such as obsessive compulsive disorder and, other kind of serious mental illness. But having said that, my assessment and other extended assessments that happened of AR did not indicate any serious mental disorder in it.
A related but slightly different point is about the risk assessments that CAMS undertook, and I just want to turn to that briefly. Were you aware that when you first started seeing AR that his case manager at the time, Mr. Scott Morgan, had done an initial risk assessment on the 8th of January 2020?
Yes, I was, yeah.
Did you review that risk assessment?
Yes.
We don't need to get it up, but sir, for your note, it's AHCH 000162, pages 14 to 15.
Thank you.
We'll come on later to risk assessments thereafter as a separate issue. But let's now focus on the first appointment that you had with AR. So this was a telephone appointment on the 1st of July 2021. And how did AR present during that first appointment?
So during the first appointment, AR was insistent that he spoke to me and he did not allow his father to speak to me. So usually during first appointments, we would gather information from parents to obtain corroborative history and then talk to the young person or meet with the young person to obtain their views and to carry out an assessment. It was very interesting that AR did not want his father to be part of the interview. He articulated symptoms of anxiety as if he had rehearsed it from a book or from the internet. The way he articulated was quite unusual. And it was very apparent that he was trying to convince me and to persuade me that he needed medication. On top of that, when we discussed medication and the need for medication, he disagreed with me on multiple occasions and slowly started becoming argumentative. At one point, when I finally said that I would give him a trial of a beta blocker, such as propranolol, to reduce his symptoms of anxiety, which he had articulated very well, the physical symptoms, he disagreed with me yet again and said that he should be on a medication such as an antidepressant called SSRI medications. I explained to him that based on the history that he has given me, I'm not convinced about the indication for a medication like SSRI medication because it's a psychotropic medication which cannot be stopped and started as and when you need it. It's a long-term treatment. So I told him that I will continue to assess his needs and that he should continue with the plan of starting propranolol. He reluctantly agreed with me. I shared all information about the benefits, the pros and cons of treatment with propranolol, but he didn't seem quite interested. It was a very brief appointment because all he wanted was to share his symptoms and get medication. So it wasn't like a standard, thorough initial assessment that we would normally offer in CAMS.
You say it wasn't standard initial assessment. Is that because of the way that AR essentially controlled the narrative of the appointment, in your view?
Correct.
You said it was quite unusual in the sense that he seemed like he'd researched symptoms of anxiety before the appointment. Did it give rise to concern for you that he seemed to be trying to manipulate the treatment that he was going to be given?
He was certainly demanding, argumentative, and tried to dictate treatment. I wouldn't use the word manipulative. It felt like he needed to be in control of the session, which is normally not the case with children.
And you say at paragraph 13 of your statement that you didn't find anything to suggest at that appointment that AR was a risk to himself or others, but presumably that wouldn't be your view had you known all of the background information that we now know was in the CAMS records?
No. At the time of the first initial appointment, I had known that he had taken a hockey stick to school and hurt another peer, and then also that he had taken a knife into school. But I wasn't aware of wider information or further incidents. However, at the time of the assessment, when the line of inquiry or questioning was focused on anxiety, risk to self and others, he denied all of them.
Would that not be just relying on his self-reporting, though, rather
Absolutely, I agree with that.
Is it not the case that young people and young children potentially with mental health issues, other complex background things, shouldn't necessarily be relied on to accurately self-report a risk to others?
Not really. We work with children with neurodiversity within CAMS. Almost 70% of children we see within CAMS have a diagnosis of ASD, or they are on the ASD pathway. They are very hard to engage. They are children who find it very difficult to work with CAMS. So I gave benefit of the doubt to engage him and to hear his version of his symptoms. And that would be considered a good practice, and with a view to gather further information from the family and the wider system subsequently.
And from the records?
And from the records.
Yes, I think this is the point you touched on a minute ago. You say it's in 12 of your statement that AR's presentation wasn't to do with risks to others, but due to reported anxiety, school refusal, and difficulties leaving the house. Looking back now, do you think you were in fact more focused on any risk to himself rather than risk posed to others?
That's correct.
And you've talked a little bit about the prescription drugs that AR was requesting. Before prescribing drugs, did you consider whether talking therapy might have been appropriate?
I was already made aware in the referral kind of information and the discussions in the MDT that AR had been offered talking therapy and he had refused to engage with talking therapies.
And we know from your statement that you went on to prescribe AR with propranolol, is that right? Because you say that SSRI medication wasn't clinically indicated at that time. And did he take that propranolol as advised following the appointment?
No. So a few days after the first appointment, I had a message from the case manager, Sam Steed, that AR had taken propranolol for just one day, so just one dose of medication, and then reported to his father. So this was the reported information from AR's father to Samantha, that AR had reported that this medication is not right for him and that he will not take it anymore, and also shared that he will only take medication if I spoke to him about it. So he was quite demanding that he needed a conversation with me about medication.
All right. And then you go on in your statement to give a very detailed account of the involvement you had thereafter in terms of the appointments with AR. I'm not going to go through every appointment or interaction, but I'll just draw out a few key points. It's right, isn't it, that following that initial appointment, AR later did agree to try propranolol again?
That's right. So for the following conversation with Sam Steed, Sam contacted the family and shared my view that AR should give propranolol a fair trial and that I would be willing to review it at the next appointment.
All right. And then you had a further telephone appointment the next month where AR was again asking for SSRI medication. Right. There was then an appointment which I think you weren't able to attend, but Dr. Aisha Asari attended.
That's right.
And they noted that AR presented with a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder and a moderate degree of social anxiety. And that doctor started AR on sertraline tablets, which is a type of SSRI.
That's correct.
In terms of the diagnosis of autism with a moderate degree of social anxiety, was that also your diagnosis as well?
I think Dr. Asari actually means that AR's presentation at the time was in keeping with anxiety in the context of a young person with neurodiversity such as ASD. So she did not give him a diagnosis of social anxiety disorder, but social anxiety that is commonly seen in children with autism spectrum disorder.
So symptoms of anxiety
yes.
arising from
Correct.
the ASD. And did you agree with that
yes,
diagnosis? Did you at any stage give thought to any other diagnoses, for example, conduct disorder?
Although AR's behavior and the demanding nature was quite unusual, I did not think about a conduct disorder at that point in time because I did not have evidence for persistent, repetitive antisocial tendencies, because that is the first feature that would alert a psychiatrist to consider a diagnosis of conduct disorder, especially in the context of a child with autism spectrum disorder. Disruptive behaviors, behaviors of concern, challenging behaviors such as trashing the house or hurting family members is not unusual. So within CAMS, we understand this in a kind of a holistic way, and we often, and try and understand this, whether this is in the context of ASD first. So considering conduct disorder at that stage was not appropriate.
Yes, so you say you didn't have evidence at that stage.
Yes.
Of persistent, repetitive, antisocial tendencies.
Yes.
But bearing in mind all of the incidents that we went through earlier, had you known all of that information, would that not have given rise to
Absolutely,
that pattern?
absolutely. I would have considered that, and not just that, I would have contacted forensic CAMS for a consultation as well.
Even though you weren't aware of the invitation to refer back to FCAMS, just of your own volition,
Yeah.
you think that would have alerted you?
Yes.
So is it right that you wouldn't disagree with Dr. Irani when she says that, in her view, AR would meet the diagnosis for conduct disorder?
I don't disagree with her, but her opinion is based on the fact that she was aware of the entire history and the incidents. So if you ask me now, I would say yes, but not at the time when I was involved.
Then just to run through a few more of the appointments. So you had a further appointment on the 13th of October 2021. At that stage, there was no improvement in terms of functioning, and so you increased the sertraline dosage. A follow-up appointment on the 15th of November 2021, where there were some positive changes reported.
Correct.
And it was reported that AR had attended school for 4 days the week before the appointment. And he did also report, though, he reported improvements in his anxiety, but you did also agree to increase his dosage of sertraline.
Yeah, wasn't that the appointment where he also complained of feeling tired from the medication? And I had said I'd review it. So he was also reporting side effects from sertraline, yet asking me to increase the dose, which was quite conflicting. So I told him that I would consider an increase in medication to wait until the tiredness wears off.
All right. So that appointment was on the 15th of November 2021. The inquiry has heard some evidence about an incident that occurred on the 5th of November 2021, during which AR trashed his house and his mother called the police. But you note in your statement that at your appointment on the 15th of November, so 10 days after that incident, neither AR nor his father informed you of the incident.
No.
And you say at paragraph 30 of your statement that you would have expected the young person and family to be open and honest with you. And if you'd been informed, you would have explored this further to ensure the right support.
That's correct.
Would you have expected Miss Steed, the case manager, to have informed you of that incident if she was aware of it?
Absolutely. We rely, as psychiatrists, heavily on information being shared by case managers and by the multi-agency, system around the child to inform our treatment and to enable, good outcomes. In this situation, the documentation about the incident by the case manager was made on the day of my appointment later in the evening. So I was unable to review that prior to my appointment. And as the family also did not share those concerns, and in fact gave me a completely opposite view, saying that he had improved, massively on medication, was a challenge for me.
You're right to note that that incident was entered into
Yes.
the CAMS records on the 15th of November.
Yes.
Did you ever check that record yourself either later on the 15th of November or at a later date?
Yes, so normally we would go back to review patient records when we have the next appointment with a young person, purely because of how busy we are and we don't have time to go into the records between appointments unless there is a reason to do so. So I was aware of the fact that there was an incident on the 5th of November at the appointment following the appointment on the 15th of November.
So you did review the record?
Yeah. And I had also confirmed that the case manager had taken appropriate steps to manage that situation. She had contacted the targeted youth support and family support worker based in West Lancashire to discuss this incident, and the family were offered support by Carl, the targeted youth worker, and the other lady, I think it was Sharon, who was the family support worker from West Lancashire.
All right.
May I also add a point here to just share that in AR's case, there was also challenges in multi-agency working and information sharing purely because of the fact that there were 2 localities involved. So within Sefton area, having worked there as a consultant for about 15 years, I do know people. I know social workers. I know, the family support workers because we work with them quite closely. Unfortunately, because AR's home address was based in Banks, the social care support and family support worker, etc., came from a different locality, and that also posed challenges in terms of communication.
Did you do anything at the time to flag that as an issue, or
Yes.
is that something that you
No,
reflected on in hindsight?
No, I did, and it was in an email to check with the administrative staff about checking that whether he should fall within our locality or be referred to West Lancashire camps. And I received a reply that because his GP was based in Sefton, we accept all patients who are open to a Sefton GP. So there was nothing we could do about it.
All right, I want to move on to some further incidents. So you explain at 33 of your statement that on the 21st of November 2021, AR's father contacted the CAMS crisis team
Yes.
to say there had been 2 incidents of intimidating behaviour by AR towards him, and that included verbal threats and pouring milk over him. Were you made aware of those incidents at the time?
I wasn't made aware of the incident at the time, but I was able to review that incident at my next appointment and understood that the collective view of crisis care team following the discussion with father of AR was that this is essentially a social issue and that it had been addressed. And also to add, actions had been taken. So the crisis care team advised that there should be a multi-agency meeting to discuss it because this behavior was within a context of difficult family dynamics. An early help meeting was held 2 weeks later, which Samantha Steed attended, and she was able to discuss appropriate support for the family. So I was aware that it had been dealt with properly.
Okay, and the inquiry has also heard about a further incident on the 30th of November 2021, where AR had kicked his father and thrown a plate at a rental car, causing the windscreen to crack.
I wasn't aware of this incident at all.
And on the 21st of January 2022, he'd made comments in school about the Holocaust. Were you aware of that?
I wasn't aware of that.
And on the 25th of January 22, he talked about the death of Princess Diana, water poisonings, and said that he believed sometimes violence was necessary. Were you aware of that?
No, I wasn't aware of that.
who, in terms of other agencies potentially, would you have expected to make CAMS aware of those matters, or would you have expected that to come from the family?
Yeah. No, in complex, situations and children presenting with complex difficulties such as AR, where multiple agencies are involved, which is actually a positive thing, school, police, and other agencies in the past, I would expect, the person who dealt with a particular incident at the time to share information with all relevant agencies that need to know about it. And that's what did not happen. And I would include police in this as well.
I then just want to turn to one final incident, which was on the 17th of March 2022, where AR went missing from his home address, and he was later found on a bus in possession of a knife. And when the police dealt with him, he made remarks about wanting to stab people and about either having thoughts about making poison or having made poison. Were you aware of that incident at the time when you were treating AR?
I was aware of this incident at the time of treating AR when he was under my care, but not immediately after the incident. Say, for example, I was able to review these notes when I saw him, after that incident, a few weeks later. And I gathered, so the information that you're sharing here about further details about him sharing information that he wanted to stab someone was not shared with us. The only information that was shared, and which was in the electronic patient records, was that AR had gone missing in the morning. So father of AR contacted us via reception to share that he had left the house at 8 a.m. and returned home at 10 a.m. 8 a.m. and returned home at 10 a.m. And between 8 a.m. and 10 a.m., AR had left the house and had gone missing. And this was not relayed to me, but only to the case manager. So I was not copied into this communication from the administrative staff. It went to the case manager, who duly contacted the family and inquired about the incident, only to be told that he had returned home. She offered an appointment the day after and assessed the risk and inquired with AR about the incident of him going missing. AR was not too keen to go into the details. However, she documented in the records that risk to others was low. Risk under the risk category, the question, she had said no risk. She had also obtained safeguarding advice from Emma Walker-Riley, our safeguarding nurse, and offered and made sure that the family, got the right support in terms of reassurance.
Okay, I'll just pause you there because we've got a separate statement from Ms. Steed. Could we bring up your witness statement and look at page 9, please? If we look at the top half of the page, so this is what you say in your statement. I was not informed of AR's missing episode on the 17th of March 2022. Based on the electronic patient records, this information was shared with the case manager, Samantha Steed, but not with me. As the consultant psychiatrist, your role was primarily around prescription, review of medication. You'd expect the case manager to raise issues with you directly if they felt your input was needed. If I had been made aware of this episode, I would have discussed this with the case manager, Samantha Steed, to ensure that appropriate advice and support was offered to parents. Then you say, I was pleased to note whilst writing this statement that the case manager had sought advice. I think that's what you were just talking about just now. It's not clear from your statement that you were aware of the bus incident from a review of the records at the time you were treating AR. Would you agree?
I was aware of it when I reviewed the records for my next appointment in April.
Okay, so by April 22, you were aware of the fact that AR had gone missing and was in possession of a knife.
Yes.
And I think, in fairness to you, that's the sort of sum of the information about it on the CAMS record.
Yes.
Rather than the extra details.
So I only had that information, no more than that, So I didn't know that he had shared with to the police constable that he wanted to hurt someone with a knife.
No.
So a young person carrying a knife, especially who is on the autistic spectrum and who is highly anxious and socially anxious, can sometimes carry weapons for protection. I'm not saying that is correct or legal. That is not correct. However, if I had been aware of this incident, I, on reflection, I could have triggered a referral to FCAMS.
Yes.
So I think, based on what we have discussed, that was a red flag.
Yes, it wasn't recorded on the CAMS record, but the inquiries heard evidence that when AR was found on the bus, he had made remarks about wanting to stab people and about potentially having made poison. So is it a matter of grave concern to you that that information did not get to you as the treating psychiatrist?
Absolutely. So, as a psychiatrist working in a therapeutic service, I could understand this incident in various different ways. So if it was made clear that he was carrying a knife on the bus with an intent to harm someone, that's a red flag.
Moving away from that incident, there were some issues, skipping forward a bit, March, April 22, issues about AR taking his sertraline consistently.
That's right.
And I believe you advised AR's father on the 26th of April 22 that he should stop taking it altogether if he'd already stopped taking it for a week.
That's right.
Why is it important for sertraline to be taken as prescribed, just very shortly?
Okay, so sertraline is a medication which has a long half-life. So it just means that it takes a long time for it to, for children to experience therapeutic benefit from it. Equally, discontinuing medication without medical advice can also lead to what's called discontinuation symptoms, which can be quite dangerous. So because AR was meddling with medication quite a few times during my involvement, I felt that it was safe to just stop the medication so that he doesn't suddenly stop it again against medical advice.
Yes. And I think there was then some ongoing issues about him taking it consistently or not going into May 22. Did you give any consideration at that stage to the fact that his risk to others might have increased if he wasn't engaging properly with the prescribed treatment?
To be very, very honest, having known him for a few months until that point, there was a demand placed on AR to start school, Westfield School, in April. I could see a pattern of behavior in AR as to whenever demands were placed on him, he would meddle with medication and then blame his inability to do the activity or go to school, for example, on the medication.
All right, I understand. I then just want to turn briefly to the events that led you to request to be replaced as AR's psychiatrist. Again, helpfully that's set out in quite a lot of detail in your statement, which I won't go through in full now. But essentially, is it right that you felt that AR's father, during and before a session on the 23rd of May 22, had been intimidating and disrespectful?
Yes. So I'd like to start by saying that this is the very first time in my entire career as a doctor where I've had to request change of psychiatrist because of how I was made to feel by a parent. It's quite unprecedented in my opinion, and I vividly remember the level of distress I went through at the end of the appointment. I also put an incident form to share this because I felt that no one else, from our department or from our, CAMS service should experience that. So I had to put an incident form, both in the interest of, in my own interest, and also in the interest of my staff, and followed the due process of requesting a change of psychiatrist by contacting the clinical lead and copied the email to psychiatry lead in Sefton. Joined a meeting with the clinical lead to try and mediate this discussion, and then went on to kind of have the outcome that actually happened. Yeah.
Yes, and it was agreed following that meeting, wasn't it, that you would be replaced with a male psychiatrist?
That's right.
And to be clear, with the intimidating and threatening behaviour, did that ever come from AR himself, or was that
Never.
just from AR's father?
Never.
And is it right that your involvement with AR ended on the 23rd of June 22 when
That's
you were
correct.
replaced?
Yeah.
We know, of course, now that Dr. Molyneux was assigned to replace AR. What handover took place between you and Dr. Molyneux?
Okay. So when I approached Dr. Molyneux about handover of clinical information about AR, I was told by Dr. Molyneux that he had already met with Samantha Steed, who had given him fair bit of information about the patient. I then gave him a verbal kind of handover of salient information that he needed to know. And that information predominantly included clinical information about medication compliance, the difficulties I had faced on the 23rd of May with his father, and about the past history. I have to say that I did not go into a lot of details about the previous involvement with Prevent or FCAMS with Dr. Molyneux.
Yes, I think you were listening into Dr. Molyneux's evidence this morning, so you will have heard him say that he was essentially unaware of all of the incidents we've gone through today that predated his involvement, save for AR bringing a knife into school, and that he was aware of one Prevent referral. Is that because you didn't pass on any of that information?
I didn't go into great details about the incidents or the previous behaviors, but it was touched upon. So he was aware that there was some concerning behaviors that necessitated police, Prevent, and FCAMS to be involved. As I said, the focus of handover was essentially on the handover of treatment that I was providing for AR, and the concerns around his non-compliance.
You say you didn't go into great detail about the incidents, but did you actually tell him about the hockey stick incident, for example?
I think I did. I'm not able to recall the entire discussion, but I'm sure I would have mentioned it.
And what about the incident with the possession of the knife on the bus in March 22?
Again, I can't remember if I specified specific, details about information, incidents. But I'm sure I handed over, in a kind of a holistic way, not without going too much into the details about each incident.
Given what you said earlier, that the focus of the handover was on handover of treatment and concerns about non-compliance, do you think you might be mistaken about whether you informed him about, for example, the hockey stick incident and the bus incident?
I honestly can't remember.
Did you have an expectation that, notwithstanding what you told him in the handover, he would also be separately reviewing the records himself?
I would think so. May I add a point on the point of handover?
Yes.
So again, on reflection, just like the point I made about information that's handed over to a psychiatrist when a new referral is made to them, I wonder if a standardized format of handover of information is developed within CAMS, especially when you are transferring care to another psychiatrist.
I now want to I said I'd come back to risk assessment earlier, and I just want to come back to it now and about how risk was assessed. It's right, isn't it, that the risk assessments conducted by case managers or any other clinicians would be, within CAMS, would be recorded on the electronic patient system, is that right?
Yes, so there are two ways in which risk is recorded. At every contact with a patient, when we complete our session notes, so basically it's an electronic way of documenting what was discussed in a session, there is a question which is a mandatory question about risk. We have to complete that as to whether it's yes or no. When we say that there is risk, say for example, yes is the answer, there is a box just below that, which is a box for a qualitative comment on what is the risk that you're worried about. So it could be risk to self, risk to others, etc. Risk of self-neglect, risk of vulnerability, risk due to substance misuse, etc., etc. So at every contact, this is documented, and that is again based on the discussions in the session. Without that, we are not able to sign a session note, and the session note will not be saved.
Okay, that's the risk assessment by you as the treating clinician.
Anyone. Anyone.
But is it also right that risk assessments are done more formally?
That's right.
And we've seen evidence that should have been done every 3 months by the case manager. Is that your understanding as well?
That's correct. So care plan is reviewed every 3 months, and or when a situation changes. So when there's a change in situation, it is reviewed again.
The Alder Hay internal learning review found that AR was risk assessed on triage on the 11th of October 2019 and the 15th of October 2019. Sir, for your note, that's AHCH 000294.
Thank you.
Page 90, paragraph 352. And then the risk management tool was only completed on 3 occasions thereafter. The 8th of January 2020, that was the assessment by Mr. Morgan that I touched on earlier. And then it was completed on 2 further occasions, the 22nd of February 24 and the 23rd of July 24. And that's paragraph 355 on page 90. So during the entire period of your involvement with AR, there was no risk assessment conducted by the case manager, was there?
That is true.
And given you were reviewing the records, you say, when you were seeing him, is that not something that you think you should have noticed as an omission?
So within CAMS, as a consultant child psychiatrist, I have supervision responsibilities for resident doctors whom I supervise. And case managers have their own allocated supervisors who are non-medical staff. So I would think that review of clinical notes and inadequacy of risk assessment would be flagged by their supervisor.
But would you, as the consultant psychiatrist, not think to say to anyone, look, no one's looked at this child's risk?
To be very honest, given how busy we are, in CAMS, I wouldn't have had the time to review what's been completed and what's not been completed.
Knowing now that there was no risk assessment done in that entire period, is that a matter of concern for you?
It is a matter of concern and should be flagged up.
Because as an outsider looking in, one might think that it's a sign that assessment of risk or concern about risk posed by AR to others had essentially just fallen by the wayside. Is that fair?
Yes, it is fair to say that.
You go on to explain at 24 of your statement that where there are concerns about radicalisation or risk to others, CAMS will request support from specialist services such as an enhanced support team or forensic CAMS who may use formal risk assessment tools such as a SAVRI. We're going to hear evidence separately about a SAVRI in more detail. But is that something that CAMS would carry out, or would you expect someone else to
No.
do it?
So, for example, these are actuarial risk assessments, and these are highly specialist and standardized risk assessments that needs training and regular supervision in terms of how these risk assessments are conducted and interpreted. So it is not something that community CAMS services, specialist CAMS services like CEFT and CAMS is equipped or trained to conduct. For example, I have heard about it in my training. I know that this exists, but I don't know anything about it, much more than that. More recently, we have established what's called enhanced support team to work with highly vulnerable and risky young people. And I'm now aware that we can ask for their support because staff who work in our Sefton EST service are trained to offer SAVRI. So that is certainly something that we now have.
At the relevant time when you were treating AR, who would you have expected to have responsibility for completing a SAVRI?
I would look up to FCAMS to support us with that.
But only if someone at CAMS or somewhere elsewhere had referred to FCAMS?
Yes.
Is FCAMS also who you'd expect to be the lead agency essentially for assessing and managing AR's risk, or would that be someone else?
This is a very wide question, to be honest. So AR presented with so many different types of risk. So risk due to non-school attendance, risk from isolation, and risk of challenging behaviors and disruptive behaviors causing harm to others. So there were so many different types of risk. There were so many agencies involved in his care, which is positive if you look at it. However, it posed immense challenge in terms of interagency communication and interagency working. And there was lack of clarity on who offers leadership for risk assessment in these cases. So it's a really difficult question for me to answer, but I hope we find some form of clarity at the end of the inquiry about this.
Based on that answer, is it fair to say that you didn't know who the lead agency was?
No, we were, basically the problem is every agency was working in silos. We were doing what we were meant to do, and other agencies did their work. We didn't communicate with each other, and that contributed to poor outcome.
Thank you. Sir, I'm conscious of time. I've only got about 5 minutes left. I'm in your hands if we carry on. Thank you. We've talked about risk assessment and the fact that the risk assessments weren't done during your period of involvement by the case manager. You will have seen Dr. Irani's report, and we're going to go to it in more detail with the next witness. But her ultimate conclusion was that the risk assessment by CAMS wasn't adequate, and the absence of the risk assessment meant there was no intervention carried out to review AR's risks to others. Is that a fair assessment of it, now, looking back with what you know now? So if I agree with that. If Dr. Irani means that adequate interventions were not carried out because of the fact that risk assessments were inadequate, I think she's talking about safeguarding social care involvement and timely involvement of FCAMS. And I do agree with that, especially after the incident in March 2022. Thank you. You've covered in your statement in quite a lot of detail improvements that have been made, which I won't go through now, but your statement is in evidence, and sir, for your note, it's paragraphs 75 to 78.
Thank you very much.
I finally then just want to draw the threads together and turn to your reflections on your involvement and any lessons learnt. And at paragraph 73 of your statement, if we could get this up. This is on the bottom of page 16. Apologies, paragraph 73. Thank you. Thank you. You say that on reflection, AR and his family had an extraordinary amount of access to clinical staff within CAMS, including myself as a consultant psychiatrist. But I believe I've demonstrated good practice by being responsive to calls and requests made by his family. The care provided by Sefton, CAMS and by me could be described as an enhanced level of care, which took several interventions, resources and times from CAMS. With the benefit of hindsight and wider understanding of the events, it appears that AR and his father were not open and honest with me during their interactions and appointments. I would also say that AR meddled with prescribed medication on multiple occasions to either obtain medication of his choice or to use stopping medication against his advice, against medical advice, as his reason to avoid school. So there you don't set out any reflections on things that you or anyone else at CAMS could have done better or differently. You've obviously now had the benefit of looking at the Alderhay internal review and also the report of Dr. Irani, which I've not taken you through in detail, but you'll be aware of its contents. Has the view that you set out here at 73 changed at all?
Certainly, 100%. So now that I have knowledge of all the incidents and multiple, agencies' involvement in AR's care, I do think that there was at least one missed opportunity for us to have considered a re-referral to FCAMS, and that could have changed some of the interventions that may have been considered for him. I also feel that on the 23rd of May, when I reported intimidating behaviors from AR's father towards me and the case manager, I could have or should have considered obtaining safeguarding advice from Alderhay safeguarding team. And the reason I say this is because if AR's father could behave in that way towards senior clinical staff, I wonder if there were some concerns for AR. And that should have been, flagged up. But I'm confident about this particular thing because I had safely handed over his care to the future team, and that AR was not left without any support from CAMS.
Your witness statement was produced at the end of July of this year. One might think that it's quite surprising that as the treating consultant psychiatrist, when you wrote that statement, you didn't feel really that there was anything you could have done differently. Do you think that you failed to reflect on what had happened here?
With the available information at this time, this was my opinion, especially given that in the period of 11 months when AR was open to me, I had offered him 9 appointments and multiple, phone calls, responsive, timely phone calls. So this would be considered as quite unusual for a young person, who presents with anxiety and avoidance and school refusal. So on that basis, I wrote this because I would, a standard number of appointments that would have been offered for another young person with anxiety and, school refusal would be about 4 appointments or 5 appointments. So he had multiple, interventions. And those interventions that were offered, including key worker, consultant psychiatrist, CBT, parenting, and family therapy, they are the evidence-based treatments that one would offer for conduct disorder. So all this made me, makes me think that reflection is correct with the knowledge at the time.
All right. So I don't have any further questions. I'll just turn to see if any call participants do. No, thank you. Do you have any questions?
I do. Just one thing, Doctor. And I ask this conscious of the problems that go with gazing into crystal balls, but I want to put a question to you based on three propositions, really.
Sure.
The first is, you'll remember that Ms. Wakeman has set out the full list of things that were known that had happened in the past.
Right.
10 times with a knife, hockey stick, Manchester, and all the rest. So imagine that that was all known by whoever had responsibility for AR at Alderhay. That's number one. Number two, there had been the diagnosis of conduct disorder. All right? So that's the second thing that I want to put in place. And the third is that around July of 2024, with that history and that diagnosis, you'd also been told that AR had been buying weapons, lethal weapons, and that his actions, certainly by mid-July, tended to indicate an intention to act out a desire, at the very least, to seriously harm others. Now, if all of that information had been in the possession of Alderhay, what, if anything, would have been done about it by the psychiatrists at Alderhay?
Okay. So, first of all, I would actually review whether Alderhay CAMS is a correct service for AR, given this information, because community CAMS are not equipped to support children and young people presenting with a conduct disorder. It needs to be kind of led by social care, and the threshold for discharging a child with conduct disorder would be very, very low, because it's a disorder of social construct. The interventions that we offer, that are offered by other agencies, and also my threshold to involve FCAMS and prevent would have been very, very, very low.
Right. I'm going to put it slightly differently then. So if you're saying that it would have been inappropriate for Alderhay to have acted on all of that information, would you have expected anyone, given the field in which you operate, to have reacted to that level of knowledge and the danger that he apparently posed?
When we have high-risk presentations in children and young people, the first person to raise those concerns and push for further interventions for keeping the young person or others safe have always been parents. So when it comes to admitting young people, or when it comes to difficulties in coping with a certain behavior of a young person, be it self-harming or be it harm to others, parents are the most important people who raise those concerns with the team and say, look, help, I think this is dangerous.
Nothing else, Doctor?
Pardon?
Nothing else? No one else? So you'd have referred this back to AR's, or you would have foreseen that this would have been referred back to AR's parents?
No.
And no other steps would have been taken?
No, I'm not saying that. So I would expect them to be, honest about their concerns with the psychiatrist, so that the psychiatrist can take appropriate action, which may include, request for an actuarial risk assessment, which may include requesting records from other agencies, which may include, referral to FCAMS and involving Prevent again. So those would have been the actions, that would have been taken.
Thank you very much for your evidence, Doctor.
Thank you.
10 minutes.
I swear by Almighty God that the evidence I shall give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Thank you very much. Please have a seat. Yes, Mr. Mills.
Dr. Killen, just start by giving us your full name, if you would.
Yeah. I'm Dr. Una Victoria Killen.
Thank you. If we could have your statement on the screen, please. It's AHCH 30229. It's a statement you gave helpfully early on the 25th of July 2025. And could you just confirm that the contents of that statement are true to the best of your knowledge and belief?
I confirm they're true.
To the extent, Dr. Killen, that I don't go through all aspects of your statement, it will be published and it stands as your evidence. I want to ask you about some aspects.
Thank you.
But on the first page, just by way of background, you are, I think, a senior and experienced clinical psychologist, is that
That's
right?
correct.
You took your doctorate in clinical psychology here in Liverpool, I think in 2002. You have additional postgraduate certification in service leadership 2017.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. As well as being a treating clinical psychologist, you have been since 2016, is this right, the clinical lead of the Sefton part of the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Service.
That is correct.
And I think prior to that, you had experience as the deputy lead for the same service.
That's correct.
Thank you. And if my maths is correct, I think you worked at Alderhay altogether for some 23 or so years.
That is
right?
also correct, yes.
Thank you. We've heard about CAMS and its role to a large extent from previous witnesses, but could we just touch upon the multidisciplinary team aspect?
Yeah.
You deal in your statement with the fact that each multidisciplinary team had an assistant clinical lead, is that right?
That's correct, yeah.
And a consultant psychiatrist.
That's correct.
And we've heard from the two psychiatrists for AR. There would be meetings, I think, weekly, lasting 2 to 3 hours for each MDT.
That's correct.
What would be the trigger for a child who is on the caseload of that MDT gaining discussion at a particular meeting?
Yeah. So there's a number of different triggers that would result in a multidisciplinary team discussion. These include changes in risk profile. They include a young person being fairly new to the treating team. They include concerns around, can include concerns around safeguarding, and they can also include concerns that a young person is not making the progress that we want them to make, sometimes known as a stuck progress.
Thank you. Your role as clinical lead, you describe it in paragraph 10, is this right, as overseeing the delivery of the service and providing assurance with regards to the safety and performance of it to Sefton CAMS.
That's correct.
And I think separate to that, you haven't become entirely, my words not yours, part of management, because I think you still gave some input at the time as a clinical psychologist to individual patients.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. Both of the consultant psychiatrists from whom we've heard today already have been asked and pressed by us as counsel to the inquiry about information checking and information sharing when they became involved. Can I just ask you about that? As the clinical lead, what was your expectation in terms of practitioners who are starting engagement with a patient, reading back through the previous notes?
So there's no formalised handover process, but we would expect that the reason for referral, presenting difficulties, care and risk screens would form part of that review of the record. In the SOP does outline reviewing the full record, although we recognise that's an onerous task. It would be important to pull out those key documents and also the letters that have been written about a young person.
At the risk of, for speed, almost appearing facetious, SOP, Standard Operating Procedure, it's not a standard operating procedure if nobody follows it.
So I think there is a lack of standardised handover, and this is something in terms of our review of our care, the record keeping and the documentation of risk and care plans was not the standard that we would hope for. So we are recognising already in our learning that the documents around risk and care plan could be much more visible than they were at the time of the intervention.
But at the time, would you agree that it was a weakness on the evidence we've heard, that whereas the SOP required the full records to be read, it sounds as though in practice, busy clinical practitioners didn't have time to do that?
No, and I think on reflection, the word whole can be a little bit confusing with the standard operating procedure as well. So the electronic patient record can be read sort of across as well as down in terms of the review. Given in the SOP, the standard operating procedure, it advises reading the whole EPR between appointments. I read that as being across the electronic patient record, although we would hold as a standard the reviewing the patient journey prior to treatment.
Whichever of those it is, would you agree that in terms of the practice that was going on at the time in 2019 through to 2022, so from when Dr. Molyneux takes over, that those important clinicians were not getting an adequate picture of AR's history?
I agree that the electronic patient record, it was not facilitating practitioners picking up pertinent information. Yep. It's been much improved now.
All right. I want to concentrate for the moment on as it was at the time. I'm going to ask the question again.
Okay.
Would you agree that those important clinicians were not getting an adequate picture of AR's history?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. What would be your expectations in terms of the case manager discussions with the psychiatrists in terms of filling in on details and areas of concern?
Yeah, we would expect that a verbal handover, including, again, reason for referral, presenting difficulties, and a brief chronology will be shared. I think it is an improvement that we have identified that this should be written down, included in the electronic patient record, so it's clear that the handover, what was included in the handover.
Thank you. Turning to your personal involvement with AR, I think you've explained in your statement, paragraph 12, page 3, it can be brought up. But I think you will agree that you first became aware of AR, is this right, on the 16th of December 2019?
Yes.
And your last direct contact with his family was on the 22nd of June 2022, is that right?
Yes.
Just keep your voice up.
Yes.
And that was when you completed a complaint resolution, which we'll come on to briefly, yes?
Yes.
I don't think you had any direct contact with AR himself, is that right?
No, that's correct.
And should we understand, therefore, that all of your involvement personally in AR's case was with your clinical lead hat on, rather than with your clinical psychologist hat on?
Yes, that's correct.
I'm asked to explore with you. Could you just give a brief overview of your understanding of the family dynamics and perhaps AR's father's behaviour and how that interacted with AR? What was your impression of that from the involvement that you did have?
I can confirm that there was 2 incident forms put into the electronic patient record after an appointment in May. Both practitioners felt that AR's father had been intimidating and aggressive, and they both, the consultant and the practitioner, felt unable to continue to work with AR. During the complaint resolution meeting, I listened to the complaint that had also been raised on behalf of the family, and we were able to get to a point that a plan for continued care could be followed. I didn't find the parents unduly aggressive or intimidating during that complaint meeting, but I've no reason to doubt the account of my colleagues who had both felt separately that they were concerned about the father's attitude.
Thank you. So as a result of that, as we've heard, we had the change from Dr. Rand to Dr. Molyneux. Yes?
That's correct.
Sam Steed, I think, to Kate Morris.
That's correct.
And within that, looking at some of the positives, would it be fair to say that you'd been able to retain one of the things that had been thought to be desirable by AR and AR's family, which was to have a female case manager?
Yes, that's correct.
And looking at that aspect, are you still of the view that those concerns, those incident reports and the way that it was handled was done reasonably well because there was continuity of care, at least to the extent there wasn't a break in care? You got alternatives in place?
Yes.
Thank you. Looking at the referral into CAMS, you explain in paragraph 15 of your statement that the early referrals, when AR was not taken on by CAMS, you think were appropriate. Can you just briefly explain why you were of that view still?
So the initial referral was around being nervous and anxious. The description was of mild to moderate levels of anxiety, and it was appropriately signposted to a partner agency that offers treatment for anxiety. The next referral was triaged by our crisis care team, and the concerns related to behaviours of concern, really, and the advice from that referral was that they would be better met with looking at target youth services, so services focusing on diversion and support, early intervention around youth justice,
Thank you. By the time of the third referral, though, which is that made on the 13th of December by Stephanie Halloran, things at that stage were clearly more serious, yes?
Yes.
And so for your note, AHCH 30121, you'll be able to confirm from the papers without, I think, it being brought up, that Ms. Halloran's referral referred to the knife possession, the hockey stick incident, and concerns about radicalisation. Yes?
Yes.
And in fact, in her assessment, the risk to others was assessed as being greater and of more concern than AR's risk to himself at that stage. Would you agree?
Yes.
You detail in paragraph 17 and onwards, we don't perhaps need the full detail, but how that was played out in terms of CAMS, so some follow-up phone calls that were received. And I think the upshot of that was Mr. Scott Morgan attending the meeting on the 19th and indeed a follow-up meeting on the 20th of December. Is that correct?
That's correct.
If we look at one aspect arising out of that, Scott Morgan got AR's mother to fill out a child behavioural questionnaire. Could we have AHCH 4090, please?
And was that, sorry to ask, with the was that requested by Scott Morgan or by the community paediatric team?
I think it was Mr. Morgan who asked AR's mother to fill out the questionnaire.
Okay.
I'll be correct on that if my notes on it are wrong. So if we just look at page 3 of this,
I really think that was the community paediatric team.
I'm so sorry, just bear with me for one moment. Page 17. We look in the middle. Oops. We look in the middle 2 paragraphs, please. So the ones on CBCL 6 to 18, the middle of the page. Do we see in relation to that looking at the top paragraph as it is now on the screen, and I appreciate that this is covering quite a wide area, but on one of the scores for anxious stroke depressed, withdrawn stroke depressed, somatic complaints, but also aggressive behaviour syndromes, those were in the clinical range above the 97th percentile. Do you see that there?
I do. Just to be really clear, though, this report was as part of the diagnostic pathway for community paediatrics, and it wasn't part of the CAMS pathway.
You don't think would this have been seen by CAMS?
It is available on the record, but it wouldn't be under the CAMS record. So it is available on the record, but it wouldn't be part of our pathway.
But not, you think, applied by you? But
no, and it wouldn't have come to us, the report. I mean, we would have been able to see it if we go looking for that, but it wouldn't have come for us for review.
The reason why I wanted to pick this up was that that score in relation to matters including aggressive behaviour seems on the face of it to be very high and within the clinical range. Was that an early warning about the extent of aggressive behaviour, do you think?
I think there was some significant concerns in the referral about aggressive behaviour. This particular checklist, I think, highlights the borderline clinical range and then recommends reviewing of the critical items to further review conduct disorder or conduct problems.
Yeah.
I think if you review the critical items at that point, only one was marked positively. So there was mixed messages through this checklist in terms of behaviour. But I don't doubt that there was concerns around his behaviour because he'd come into referral with significant concerns.
Thank you. And taking it from the early position in relation to this, you've heard questions that have been asked of other witnesses today. You've seen Dr. Irani's report concluding that AR, in her view, met the diagnostic criteria for conduct disorder. First of all, are you aware that that's what Dr. Irani says?
Yes.
And do you think, from your position as clinical lead, you would agree with that?
I think on reflection and gathering all the information, that I think I heard my consultant colleagues to confirm that that would be a possible diagnosis. I think the challenge for a community mental health service is that we work on a formulation-based approach, and there was an existing kind of understanding that fitted the facts and fitted the information that we had. So AR's predominant difficulties throughout his journey with CAMS related to his anxiety, his difficulties engaging in education, his difficulties going out, and that understanding remains relevant.
But some risk that conduct disorder may have been overlooked in that mix.
On review of the behavioural pattern over a period of time, it's a pervasive and persistent pattern of behaviour. I think there's lots of challenges around the diagnosis, but yes, I think I would agree with my consultant colleagues that the consideration of conduct difficulties could have been revisited.
In fairness, it should be noted that many of the treatment options perhaps would have been the same.
Yes, that's correct.
Scott Morgan explains in his statement that he completed a risk assessment management tool. Can we have a look at that, please? It's AHCH 30162. Page 14, please. And it's the bottom half of the page. So please mention if any sibling of the person is at risk. Yes, brother Dion, but only if he hurts. It says and animal. The family have no pets. What's the nature and degree of the risk? Who's at risk? And so on. We see at the bottom of the page that what's been filled out there is lack of emotional regulation, has ASC. And if we go over the page.
Yeah.
AR attended school to hurt another pupil, but got a different one instead. He states this was a planned revenge attack from being bullied. Reports from school about terrorism. AR denies all of this. Prevent have also stated that they have not found anything malicious, radicalised with AR. Unintentional risk to others, none. Risk management played currently under child in need until police have checked in with his computer. Once this is received, we will be able to establish a better plan going forward. AR is to remain at home without school to see myself as some emotional regulation work. Is that the standard of risk assessment in terms of the quality and level of detail that you would expect for a case of this seriousness?
No, I think we've recognised that the risk management tool was neither filled out comprehensively enough or regular enough in the record on review. And I would agree that the detail, and especially the updated detail, following the consultation from FCAMS wasn't included, and that would have been beneficial.
Why was it poor in that way?
I think it's the level of detail, the concern, on his entry, I don't think is fully reflected in this document.
And why weren't staff giving enough detail? Is that a training issue, a resource issue, poor performance?
I think, there's certainly, we're doing quite a lot of work around, we have been for a number of years around documentation and the time it takes for case management forms to be completed. We've reduced the number from 4 to 2, and there is a way of monitoring that. So I think it is, I would say, Mr Morgan was a well-qualified social worker. I don't think that was a training issue. I think it was the lack of detail is due to time taken to complete the form.
What, doing it too quickly?
I think so.
Yes, keep your voice up.
Yes, I think so.
Thank you. The 2 letters from FCAMS, which you've referred to in your statement, can we just look at them quickly, please? AHCH 30231, the first one. Just go on to page 2, please. So we can see that this is dated the 11th of February, and it's to Ms Halloran from Mr John Hicklin of FCAMS following the referral and following the meeting that had taken place on the 21st of January. There's quite a lot of detail in here, but you'll be familiar, I think, with the fact that Mr Hicklin was saying that he discussed the case with Scott Morgan, made Mr Morgan aware of the concerns of professionals. We see in the second paragraph that he records that AR had been open to prevent, had been accessing mass shooting videos, now closed to prevent. The hockey stick attack is dealt with, AR demonstrating little insight into consequences. The third paragraph records that AR's presentation likely met the criteria for autism. He recorded that given the level of concern that was felt by professionals, liaison with the paediatric team needs to take place to ensure that they're aware of the concerns and that the paediatric team contribute to the risk management plan. From your knowledge of the record, did Mr Morgan adequately record all of the detail in relation to those matters into the CAMS records?
No.
And again, was that a question of poor individual performance? Not taking enough care?
I think Mr Morgan left the service quite quickly, and it was only after that he'd left that we were made aware of the record keeping. So I can't provide a lot of detail about the reasons for that. But yeah, I would expect the record keeping standards at this time were below the standard we would expect from our service.
Thank you. If we go to the 4th paragraph, the bottom of the page, so I highlight the most important factor in managing the risk will be identification and integration into appropriate educational provision. Commented the educational service then over the page will need to complete their own risk assessment. This will need to be completed in line with the process gaining in EHCP, and we'll come back to the EHCP perhaps in a little moment. There's also reference in this letter to the importance of the paediatric team and getting the ASD diagnosis. From your understanding at this stage, who was the lead agency that was meant to be taking these things forward? You've got different teams, FCAMS, CAMS, you've got the paediatric department working on the ASD diagnosis. Who was meant to be taking it forward?
I think in respect to the paediatric pathways, it's documented that Mr Morgan had said that he would progress that, although there's no evidence in the notes that that happened. So it would be appropriate for us as a CAMS service to forward for the ASD diagnosis. I think the caveat with that is where the assessment of the forensic assessment is kind of paused or not completed due to a lack of an ASD assessment, and I think so. I think
we'll pick some of that up with FCAMS, but from the point of view of CAMS, you would have expected, would you not, to see CAMS in a documented way, my word, trying to expedite the autism diagnosis because of its importance to assessing the risk and to treating AR.
Yes, and that happens now. That is an improvement that has happened already with the service.
Again, I have to ask you these matters as the service lead. Are you aware that Mr. Morgan's evidence, even to this inquiry, is that he only met with AR once?
Yes.
But that it's documented contemporaneously. So for your note, he wrote to Ms. Jameson on the 14th of February, CH 4095, saying, I've met with AR on several occasions. Yes?
Yes.
And there was only one documented.
Yes. Yes.
And again, that failure to make clinical records of meetings with AR at this time fell significantly below the required standard.
It did fall below the required standard, and we have done a lot of work to provide assurance that this would not happen now. The way appointments are booked and the way session notes are recorded, it's impossible to have that disconnect.
Thank you.
Highly unlikely.
In the letter that we still have on screen, we can go to the last paragraph. There's a whole raft of interventions. Last paragraph, mainly last paragraph, I also highlighted that AR would likely benefit. That there's a raft of things there that are being suggested that should be done. So benefit from interventions, focusing on ability to think consequentially, improving his capacity for an empathetic response, developing a range of alternative strategies to anger and developing strategies to manage stresses in his life, interventions that should focus on emotional recognition and regulation. And then it said that Scott Morgan will liaise with colleagues in CAMS and make comment on the forthcoming meeting as to how this need may be met. Did that happen, so far as you can tell from what was documented?
No, I can't see that in the record.
And those at that stage were interventions that rightly or wrongly appear to have been given to CAMS, would you agree? If not to provide, then at least to organise and take forward.
I think there is an invitation to multiple systems providing these interventions. And I think that the opportunities for learning around multi-agency conversations about who does what is a learning point.
Yeah. But so it should be clear who is going to do what, who's going to actually provide the interventions, but also clear who is going to organise them and check that they have been done.
Yeah.
And it doesn't look from the records as though either of that happened. Not clear that the interventions happened, and not clear that anybody was keeping an eye on them. Would you agree?
At this point in the record, I would agree there's no evidence of that. There is a subsequent conversation that I had with the youth offending team.
Yeah, there's some information which we might touch on with the yacht later into some of the aspects. Thank you. In your paragraph 35, at page 8 of your statement, you say that interventions linked to reducing risk of offending would be primarily the role of the youth offending team. However, as a safeguarding partner, we would heed advice as to the likely effective interventions that we could offer, and we did indeed focus on anxiety and social anxiety and emotional regulation.
Yeah.
That aspect of your statement might be taken to suggest that some of these interventions weren't, at least ideally, for CAMS to take forward. Would you agree?
Yes.
Others were better placed?
Yes.
Have you seen anything in the documents that suggests that Mr. Morgan or others in the service at this time said, this has been put at our door, but actually we're not best placed to do this. Can you take them forward?
I can't see reference to multi-agency meetings or conversations that provides an adequate multi-agency care plan at this point, no.
Thank you. And then the second letter, AHCH 30231, please. Thank you. Let me just go to page 4. Sorry, perhaps just try the thank you. So 9th of March, we've seen this before. I'm not going to read it all out because the learned chair's seen it and you'll have heard it referred to. But you'll recognise this as Mr. Hicklin giving his input on matters to be taken into account for young people with an autism spectrum condition diagnosis. Bottom of the page, list 3. If you just go over the page, just remind yourself. And then the passage at the bottom, which has been read out, I think, twice today now, so I won't read it out again. But the aspect of FCAM saying that until his diagnosis is complete, they wouldn't be able to contribute further on the understanding of risk, and an invitation to come back. At this time, do you know whether this letter actually went to CAMS at the time? Because it's addressed to Ms. Halloran.
Yeah, there's no record that it arrived. There is an email that I sent because I didn't have sight of this letter and understood that it existed.
That's why I said at the time.
Yeah.
I'm going to come back
Yeah.
to that. But at the time, there's no record of that arriving directly.
No.
At that time.
No.
Thank you. In paragraph 20 of your statement at page 4, picking matters up at about this time, March, I think you raised concerns within Sefton CAMS that a number of staff were off poorly and that it had left some patients without case managers. Is that right?
That's correct.
We remind ourselves, of course, of the significance of those dates. So the first wave of the pandemic, obviously, but also I think Mr. Morgan, as you've touched upon, had left abruptly in February. You say 2019, I think you meant February 20.
Apologies, that's, 2020.
But we just cross through and say 2020. Noting the mitigation, COVID, and a member of staff leaving abruptly, that did mean that there was a gap for AR at this time where he was without a case manager for quite a significant period. Would you agree?
Yes.
We also see that in terms of the meetings that FCAMS attended, so different to the original strategy meetings, the FCAMS attended meetings on the 21st of January and the 4th of March 2020. I think you'd agree that there was no CAMS representative at them.
No, and that would not be in line with our service expectations. Although we were stretched for staffing, we would expect that meetings will be covered.
Thank you. I'm asked to explore with you, I'm going to do so briefly. Is there any indication that CAMS communicated to Lancashire County Council, so their Children's Social Care, or the Child and Family Wellbeing Service, about Mr. Morgan's departure?
I think there's a reference to an email that I sent, but I think that was to the Youth Justice team, Anna Jameson.
Yeah.
In my statement, I think I referenced an email that I sent advising that Scott had left, there was a new case manager identified, but I can't be sure that went to Lancashire Children's Services.
Do you think that enough was done in terms of the local authority and social care and the CFW team to put them in the picture about the difficulties that you had at that time, in terms of you couldn't cover it, there wasn't a case manager? Do you think that they should have been put more in the picture in relation to that?
Yes, it would be helpful. I think information sharing around the system is something that, the more information that's shared in a more timely way, of course, will be helpful.
Against that background, you tell us in paragraph 20 in the bottom of that page, paragraphs 23 to 22, that it was in that context that I think that the CAMS input into the EHCP came to you as service lead because there wasn't a case manager or anybody else to do it. Would that be right?
That's correct.
Just briefly in relation to the document itself, if we have AHCH 503, and if we could go to page 2, please. And if we look at the bottom of the page, again, I'm not going to read it all out, but if you just remind yourself of it, and then over to page 3, top of the page. Was there a reference, in fairness to you, to the youth offending team intervention on anger management and offending behaviours? There didn't seem to be any reference to some of the grave information that was available to CAMS, the hockey stick incident, the possession of knives in school, internet browsing. That didn't appear to form part of the matters that you were alerting to.
No, my focus on completing this was about identifying the health needs, and as I understood from the records, they were focusing on emotional kind of development, emotional language, but no, it didn't include those other.
Looking back now at the totality of events that I've gone through with other witnesses, as has Ms Wakeman, do you think that those matters should have been flagged up more in the EHCP? Because some of them were risks occurring at school and at risk of worsening in the school environment in terms of school internet use?
I think one of the learnings that has come through personally and as a service, I think, is that we perhaps assume other people in the system have information. And I think that due to the information being highlighted from schools, there was I had an assumption that that was already included in the record. For my part, with completing this document, I was focusing on the emotional health and wellbeing aspect.
Thank you. Given the risk of him changing schools, it would be important for all of that to be captured in the plan.
Yes.
You deal in your statement with the fact that after this, Mr. Coppard, Sam Coppard, was identified as the new case manager. Is that right?
That's correct.
I think you gave a handover to him of the information and what you'd been doing on the case.
That is correct.
Thank you. In paragraph 28 of your statement, can we just deal with it by reference? Forgive me, paragraph 27. If we pick it up at the bottom of page 5. So it's AHCH 30229, page 5. Deal with 17th of April 2020, getting an email from Ms Simpson, a colleague in the crisis care, advising that Anne Simpson from Lancashire Yacht had been in contact, and then over the page, you refer to being unsure as to the precise time and date of the call. So for your note at AHCH 30162, page 30, there's a record of the call in note form. Yeah. But you noted during the phone call that the risk assessment that had been shared by Anne Simpson was reoffending risk medium, significant harm risk medium, risk to children no. And as you say in the paragraph below, you added a comment that this was unusual. Is that right?
Yes.
And if we go over the page to 31, taking it as briefly as I may, you say, with the benefit of hindsight, you would have recorded the conversation with Anne Simpson in more detail.
Yeah.
And I would have asked specifically about risk to children and the detail of the risk assessments that have identified a medium risk of reoffending and significant harm. And you would have inquired about and recorded specific details of any children's services involvement and any meetings planned for multi-agency communication. The email doesn't appear in the electronic patient record, and that's an omission, and that was a problem, wasn't it? Emails being sent but not copied across to the notes?
Yes, there was, in our learning around record keeping, there was a number of omissions, and predominantly around email or text or loose paper documentation.
and again, taking it briefly for speed, but there was something quite peculiar given AR's risk information, taking a knife into school 10 occasions in October 29, actually assaulting a serious assault with a hockey stick while carrying a knife on another pupil in December 2019. There was something very odd on its face about the risk to children being marked as no.
Yes, and I should have been more curious, and it also provides an opportunity to read across to the risk management tool as well.
Thank you. Then you deal in paragraph 30 with the fact that on the 1st of May, following up on the phone call that you'd received, I think you then get in contact, is this right, with FCAMS and a number of others, and you notice that you haven't had the readout from the FCAMS involvement.
Yes.
You get the FCAMS letters,
Yes. Yeah.
ones that we've looked at, and taking it again shortly, it's right, isn't it, that at the time you had understood that those letters were scanned into the system and would therefore be available for practitioners going forwards.
Yes.
You don't need to turn it up, but that would be, would you agree, particularly important because of the FCAMS letter, the 9th of March 2021, which gave what might be thought to be helpful guidance in bullet point form on areas of concern in the risk with if there was an autism diagnosis, but also what might be thought to be the invitation to re-refer to FCAMS if there was a change in position or the diagnosis was confirmed. That was
Yes.
an important letter, yes?
Yes, I agree.
And I'm not suggesting, Dr. Killen, that it was your fault, but it has emerged that those were not in fact scanned onto the system, is that right?
That's correct.
And although you passed that information on to Sam Coppard, because they were because they were not physically on the record, there would be an issue about how visible they would be when Sam Coppard stopped being the case manager, or if others were involved.
Yes, I only identified that the missing scanning this year.
Thank
But
you.
yes, it would have been a mission.
Yeah, after the attack.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this year.
I should mention that we had made available to us over the weekend. It is now on call participants' disclosure at AHCH 30324, the internal investigation in relation to this, which in addition to the 2 letters, I think, that I mentioned, indicates that 3 documents are now permanently lost. And it says, given the time there's elapsed, the search is undertaken and the inability to locate the records, the Trust has concluded that these records are permanently missing, lost, without any clear audit trail of where they may be. And that is an unsatisfactory state of affairs, would you agree?
Yes. I think the FCAMS letters do form part of those, which we now do have in, because I think the dates are the four pages. But yes, it's unsatisfactory.
At this time, when you had to have an involvement as clinical lead and then were passing things on to Sam Coppard, had you yourself spotted the risk that not all of those interventions that Mr. Hicklin had recommended had been taken forward?
The FCAMS letters were sent to me after my conversation with the youth offending team. During that conversation, the youth offending team advised that through the referral order, they would be targeting the offending behaviour and risk to others. And they were clear that they felt that the role for CAMS was to focus on anxiety and anxiety management.
And was that in relation to each and every one of the interventions that have been recognised by Mr. Hicklin, or was it a more general, we'll deal with the offending behaviour?
It wasn't. I didn't specifically go through each intervention, but I recorded that the focus of the mental health support would be helpfully focused around anxiety. and I was confident that that was going to form part of the care plan going forward.
I understand for the CAMS role, but wouldn't it have been good practice, given that you were aware of the letter and the specific recommendations, to check that those were all being, in my words,
check
ticked
back.
off?
Yes, that would have been helpful.
Thank you. I want to move to early 2021, because in paragraph 40 of your statement, you say that following the autism assessment and diagnosis in early 2021, AR's father at that stage requested a re-referral to CAMS on the 3rd of February 2021. Is that right?
Yes, there had been a conclusion of work with Mr Coppard, although the records weren't closed off, so there wasn't a discharge on the system.
So Mr Coppard had finished his work, and it may be that in other circumstances he might have been discharged,
Yes.
but in fact he hadn't been. Was
Yes.
that an oversight?
It was an oversight, and yes, he should have been discharged.
So technically he was still open.
Yes.
And as you detail there, it's from then that Sam Steed takes over as the case manager. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
You also say, though, that engagement with Miss Steed focused on anxiety management, graded exposure, problem solving and re-engagement with education. This was all consistent with the outcome of the FCAM's recommendations. Now, that may be strictly speaking accurate in the sense that that action and that proactive activity was consistent with what FCAMs were saying. But dare I suggest that the elephant in the room is that FCAMs had said effectively that there would be a case for re-referring to FCAMs once the diagnosis of autism was made, because they then might be able to give more help in relation to risk.
I hadn't read the letters like that. I read the letters that there'd be a change in circumstance. I hadn't read that it was as clear as that, and I think that would be helpful. But yes, having reread the letters more recently, I can see that that would be a helpful intervention after the ASD referral.
And I'm going to suggest, to put that beyond doubt, AR was somebody for whom, looking at him as an individual, not making a generalization about autism, looking at him as an individual, his autism might increase the risk because he had already shown traits of a specialized interest, an obsessive interest perhaps, or a fascination with violence and violent material.
Yes, that's correct.
A lack of empathy,
Yes, that's correct.
yes, in his criminal assaults, and a lack of understanding of consequences, yes?
Yes,
All matters that in fact were highlighted in Mr. Hicklin's letter.
yes, yes.
So even if there was an ambiguity about exactly what the letter meant, knowing the information about AR's risk would have put him, can I suggest, squarely in the category of someone for whom a re-referral to FCAMs would have been an appropriate step to take.
Yes,
And that should have happened in February 21.
yes.
Thank you. You go on in your statement to deal with the change in psychiatrist and your role in relation to that. And I've touched on that already briefly, and you've indicated that you think that was appropriate action. Looking at a slightly different aspect of that, and you may have heard Dr. Ram touch on this, do you think the fact that an experienced psychiatrist such as Dr. Ram felt intimidated and even threatened to an extent by AR's father, and Ms. Steed has also reached a stage where effectively the relationship had broken down, do you think that itself may have been an indication of increased risk at the time?
I didn't at the time, but I think in reflection, looking at opportunities for multi-agency and multi-system working, which are imperative when we're looking at risk to others. I think that is a helpful reflection.
Thank you. At paragraphs 47 to 51 of your statement, you'd appreciate, Dr. Killen, that I'm dealing with a lot of helpful detail in your statement, some of it at speed. But at paragraphs 47 to 50 on page 11 of your statement, you detail aspects in which, when AR had ceased engaging, efforts were still made to engage with him. So very briefly, things like offering him home visits, his preferred venue, would you agree?
Yes.
Preference for a female case manager, which is something that I've touched on with you in the appointment of Kate Morris. And that leads you in paragraph 52 at page 12 to say, even with the benefit of hindsight, I cannot see that any more could have been done to re-engage AR in the service. Now, I'm going to come on to other aspects of reflection, but just looking at that in terms of the efforts made to get AR to re-engage, does that remain your view?
I think on reflection, I looked at the phrase re-engagement, whereas if we look at that as engagement, we can see that he did have multiple case managers, that people changed without preparing him for that change. So I think there are things that we could do across his whole journey that would have been more helpful in terms of not having those breaks in support.
So continuity, both
Yes.
in terms of not having breaks, but also continuity of the same people, can't always be achieved.
No.
But if it can't be achieved, then at least mitigating the change by trying to smooth it out, sharing information about why it's necessary.
Yes.
Thank you. I want to turn now to, in the remaining time that we have, to deal with the assessment of risk at CAMS. Can I go straight to this issue? Where did the responsibility for the assessment of risk fall as between CAMS and FCAMS in AR's case?
I think that we defer that responsibility to FCAMS. I think on reflection and with the benefit of learning, I think the non-assessment by FCAMS of AR incorrectly reduced our assessment of risk to others. So I think that we would flag to AR, and I think we mistook, if that's the right word, for the non-assessment as a perhaps not meeting threshold for forensic assessment, which with hindsight is not that what's in those letters.
And we'll come to this with witnesses tomorrow, but do you now understand that FCAMS say corporately, actually it was always CAMS who maintained the lead in responsibility for doing the risk assessments? We would help them with it, but it was never our responsibility to actually do the risk assessment.
My understanding of working in community mental health services, we would defer to the risk assessment by FCAMS should they do a full assessment. So I would appreciate more commissioning oversight of that. I think that it's one of the areas where the interface is not as clear as perhaps it could be, and going forward it has to be. I think it's very difficult for a mental health service to hold and manage risk that you haven't assessed yourself. So I would think that's quite a difficult position and would need a lot of work and thinking about it. I have worked with other young people where FCAMS we haven't been involved. There are young people who don't consent to having a mental health service that pose risk to others. And FCAMS can continue to be involved with the support of a lead agency such as social care. So I think that it would be helpful to review that. For my sense, I would consider FCAMS as providing an assessment of risk, and in that regard, taking the responsibility for advising around risk.
Right. So even now, and again we'll explore it tomorrow, but if I've correctly understood their witness statements, when they're saying we help CAMS in this context with their risk assessment, but they own the assessment of risk, you don't even agree with that. You think there needs to be greater clarity in that area?
I think there needs to be greater clarity, especially when risk to others is outside of a significant mental illness, because I think then there is a number of agencies that are required to support and manage that risk. And I think that greater clarity about information sharing, clinical responsibility and responsibility of managing the risk will be helpful going forward.
Thank you. You accept in your statement, you've touched on it already in your evidence, and it's also reflected in the Alder Hey internal review, which has shown that those risk assessments were not done, first of all, with the frequency that they should have been.
That's correct.
They should have been every 3 months, yes?
Yes.
Whereas, in fact, they were done on the 11th, following the triage of the original referral on the 11th of October 2019 and the 15th of December 19. Thereafter, there were only risk assessments on the 8th of January 2020, the 22nd of February 2024, and the 23rd of July 2024. Yes?
Yeah, there was an additional risk assessment on the 12th of August that isn't in, for some reason hasn't pulled through to that record. So there was another one, but in any event, they weren't
Which year?
done. That was in 2021. I wrote it down, I think it's 2021.
Even allowing for that one further one
Yeah.
not dealt with in the internal report for whatever reason, that's not just missing the risk assessments every 3 months. That's woefully shortened.
Yes, and we at the time, as I say, that we have updated our record keeping kind of policies, and we have, I see a report, it's a live update around the timeliness of risk assessments that are completed. So it did fall far short from what we would hope to provide, and I can only apologise for that in this record and provide assurance that going forward there is the risk form in itself has been improved, and also that the monitoring of the timeliness of completion is accessible to me as a lead and my other leads in the service.
I won't go through each and every one of them, but you will have reviewed them, I know, Dr. Killen, with care. I took you to the one by Mr. Morgan. Would you agree that across the board they lack sufficient detail in terms of the risk to others?
Yes.
And they lack a proper understanding of the background history of the series of concerning events that we explored with the psychiatrists earlier today in evidence?
Yes.
And just to pick up that, if we look at AHCH 30160 in terms of where it leads, this is Ms. Morris's risk assessment for the 23rd of July, and you'll see soberingly how close to the attack we now are. And if we see at the top of the page, no reports of AR being a risk to his sibling during my allocation, can be verbally abusive towards his dad, and has become upset, angry, throwing a phone when the camera was turned towards him by mum, note by Sam Steed. And then intentional risk to self, which is dealing with other aspects, unintentional risk to self. And then if we go down to the second half of the page, intentional risk to others and property. AR previously hurt a peer who he mistakenly thought was the peer who had subjected him to bullying. This occurred at the school site. AR attended the school site with the intention of hurting the peer who was bullying him. His intention was to exact revenge, and AR is open about this. Thrown a phone in anger during a CAMS video call. Subject of prevent referrals. The latest in connection with AR speaking with a member of staff about troubles in Palestine and Israel. And then AR took the latest referral very personally and wanted to know what school staff had recorded about him. AR's father eventually showed him the detail of the referral. AR wanted to discuss this with his teacher support and so on. He's upset, but the thoughts that school had about him in relation to thinking he's a terrorist threat due to his world knowledge re matters such as Israel and Palestine school are concerned at AR knowing the details of the referral. I felt it could be emotionally harmful for him to see the details. I'm not aware of the content of the referral. I'm aware that Axel was upset, and then over the page, by the referral. So some detail given there, but there's no real attempt there to grade that risk to others. Would you agree?
Yes, and that's changed in our risk management tool.
Just stick with what was done at the time.
Yeah, no, there
There's
wasn't
no
grading.
attempt to grade that.
No.
And there's quite a lot of taking at face value, would you agree, what AR was saying about the matters, rather than trying to look at the objective overall picture?
Yes, I'd agree.
There is a CYP, I think child or young person current view, that is done at the same time, AHCH 30159. Can you just explain what this document is?
So this is a clinician-rated problem scale that we complete as part of our work.
Thank you. And in that document, we can see under risk, poses risk to others, that the answer is just under question 16 to question 20, poses risk to others, none. How did that come to be?
I think that my colleagues have shared that over the course of AR's journey with CAMS, the risk to others that was particularly present at his referral and was present at other points in the record was not held as clearly as it could have been. I think this form is getting completed with that practitioner's knowledge of their time when they were in as a case manager. And I think that some of the learning we've identified is holding those risks across time is something that will be important going forward.
How far short of acceptable was this assessment of risk to others?
In my learning, I identify that I think an actuarial risk assessment would be extremely helpful. When we're assessing risk, we're looking at static and dynamic factors, and I think the static factors are really important, but of course those dynamic factors that we can influence and change are often at the forefront of our clinical practice. I think that an actuarial risk assessment helps us hold both of those, which is of course important going forward.
Doctor, should we try that one again?
Yeah.
My question was, how far short of acceptable was this? How far short of acceptable was this assessment of risk 6 days before the attack?
Yes, it's unacceptable. There was risk on the record and it should have been recorded in this form.
How far short of acceptable? Very far?
Very far.
And does it follow that you would agree with the conclusions of Dr. Irani in relation to these aspects? I think you've touched on it and helpfully volunteered really some of the answers. But she was pointing, was she not, in her report, to the fact that the tool that was being used by CAMS was inadequate?
It's too generic to hold on to the specific risks to others that presented in this example.
And because of that, and because of failures early on to assess the risk correctly, taking Dr. Irani's report very shortly, by the latter stages, the risk to others was really not being addressed adequately at all. Would you agree?
I think I think in terms of looking forward, that is something that we would be learning about.
There was the ability to do the actuarial type of risk assessment with SAVRI, would you agree?
Yes.
Did you have people who were trained in using that?
There are members of our team, but we would usually refer to FCAMS for that assessment to be completed.
And again, would you accept that that should have happened not just when AR got his autism diagnosis, but at other key stages most notably perhaps the bus incident in March 22?
Yes, and on initial referral.
Thank you. Just give me a moment if you would. Could we have on screen, please, DRI 501 at page 25? Dr. Irani's report, and could we have the bottom three quarters from 3.5.1 expanded, please? So the adequacy of the interagency working arrangements that were in place generally. Can I just check whether you accept the fairness of these observations? So 3.5.1.1, there were a number of interagency meetings, not all were attended by all parties involved in AR's care consistently.
I accept that was in the early part of the AR's journey, and we recognise that multi-agency working could be improved. However, it is of note that we did attend all those meetings we were invited to, and we did flag on a number of occasions to our colleagues in other services that we're concerned about the lack of progress of AR.
Thank you. When other agencies like Prevent were referred to, it was unclear how they carried out their decision making and how this was communicated to the services that were directly involved with AR. Do you agree with that?
Yes.
From the documents made available to me, his presentation at the time was attributed to his diagnosis of autism and felt not to require a threshold for referral to channel. Was that your understanding too, or was that
That was my
beyond?
understanding.
Yeah. Minutes of multi-agency meeting were not always clearly documented and shared with all parties concerned.
That's correct.
Latterly, as he disengaged from education and CAMS, it was unclear who remained involved and who was in communication with the transitions team that was meant to continue working with him. Fair?
That's correct.
And it's Dr. Irani's opinion, whilst there were a number of meetings, in the absence of a lead agency, a clear handover process and an appropriate risk assessment, the interagency working arrangements in AR's case were not adequate. And that's fair.
I would agree, yeah.
Thank you. You've accepted, and it's in the Alder Hey internal review, that there are also issues, I think, about record keeping more generally and the standard of them. Yes?
Yes.
So for your note, Dr. Killen has, starting at page 88 of her statement, got sections on reflections and detailed sections on improvement as well. Could we just look at one aspect of that, paragraph 89? The questions that remain are how and by whom should the risk concerns related to the index offence have been identified and monitored in circumstances where neither Prevent nor MAPA were deemed appropriate frameworks. For future learning and with hindsight, further guidance about this would be invaluable. So is that really flagging up that the gap in the arrangements, or at least a lack of clarity about who the lead agency is in a case such as AR's?
Yes.
You've flagged and acknowledged that FCAMS provided consultation but didn't complete a direct assessment, recommended a re-referral should risk be made, and I've covered aspects of that. A potential trigger for re-referral would have been the aggression reported in the home. However, this level of aggression for children with complex needs is not significantly out of the ordinary, and his parents reported feeling confident to manage risks. But carrying a knife on a bus?
Yes. Yes.
In addition, there was an incident reported where I might have left home with a knife, and that's what I've just asked you about. Even that, the reference to might have left home with a knife, in circumstances where what in fact happened was AR did have a knife, the police took it off him, had it in their possession and gave it back to mother, There was a conversation about AR saying that he wanted to stab someone, and it's not disputed that there was a conversation at least between AR and the officers about poison. That was crying out for a serious reassessment of the risk to others.
I would agree.
And it might be the actuarial risk assessment should be better embedded in multi-agency systems. So when risk arises, the historic risk is also taken into account to recognise if further concerns should be flagged. But in addition, you as a service, would you agree, must have a process in place to ensure that knowledge that you do have is readily visible for later clinicians so that risk information is not lost.
Yes, and that is in place now. So as soon as you open up a young person's record as a CAMS practitioner, the document and date of the most recent care and risk plan comes up, as does a systemic risk form and the current view and key CAMS data.
And Dr. Killen, would you forgive me for asking the question as to why that important additional aspect wasn't in your reflections, in your witness statement?
About the electronic patient record, or that the...
Well, more about the fact that it might be thought that important risk information was known to CAMS, was documented in CAMS, not all of it, but a lot of it, but wasn't taken into account by clinicians going through. That would appear to be, it might be thought, a very significant lesson about your own organisation. And I'm asking you why, although there's helpful reflections in paragraph 89 and important ones on gaps, on interrelations with FCAMS, to extent with PREVENT, but why the matters in your own organisation weren't identified in the reflection statement by you as the clinical lead.
I would agree. I think the risk-taking work that we need to do and to have that clear with detail and updated regularly is part of the independent learning review, and we'll be absolutely taking it on board. And I think it's an omission that it wasn't in my statement.
So I'm just looking to my left. I don't think there are any questions. So do you have any questions for this witness?
I don't. Dr. Killen, thank you very much for your frank evidence this afternoon.
Thank you.
Does that bring us to a close
That's
this
the
afternoon?
end for today. Thank you for sitting late, and 10 o'clock if we may tomorrow.
By the standards of Lady Justice Thirlwell and the Letby inquiry, we're rising early this afternoon, Mr. Moss, so you needn't apologise. They were regularly sitting, I think, between 6 and 7.
Right forward.
10 o'clock tomorrow.
Thank you.